just discussing the secret to ultra running, but we've done that. We've covered that now. So
what was it? I know. I need to know.
No,
God
we've
damn
covered it. We've
I'll
covered
stay
it.
terrible forever. So, dear badders, next guest doesn't need a huge amount of introduction, and Nick, the editor, is going to have a weird time with today because we've already been talking to him for about 25 minutes and having a wonderful time, and actually it'd be quite good to include that. But if you don't know who Jim is, then well, you definitely know who Jim is. It'd be really weird for you to listen to us and to this if you don't know who Jim is. But he's won Western States a million times. He's got the record. He's got the 50K, 100K record. He's done a huge amount of incredible running. So welcome to the podcast, Jim Walmsley.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. How are the holidays for you guys?
I think contrasting. I've been out partying.
And I've got kids. So no. So there we are. There's the difference.
And we're both ruined. How about yourself?
Sometimes it's been good. I think sometimes I would take the kids option only to be able to maybe go to bed earlier. But maybe that's not the case. I have no idea.
You've been training hard throughout?
No, I'm kind of shutting. So raced Ultra Trail Cape Town a bit late in the season, and trying to kill time to open up my schedule later in 2022 than I usually do, because I think I usually end up racing maybe January, February, and I'm always training through the holidays, and it's usually pretty stressful. And so I'm trying to cross train as much as I can this month, which is not a normal thing I do.
What did you make of Cape Town?
It was awesome. I loved it. Yeah, I had a really good time. They have just a really nice, friendly team of kind of people at the event that, at least for the foreigners, I mean, it made it really seamless to preview the course, learn like a bunch of good places to go. They have a ton of good coffee there. And then the race itself, I guess I feel like I made some mistakes during it, but all things considered, it couldn't have gone better.
I guess that's going to happen though, isn't it, when you go to a completely new race and new continents, new terrain, everything. There's not much more you can change.
Yeah, I mean, at least for Cape Town, it seems like most people are all having to travel to Cape Town to race. Generally speaking, pretty far. Even the Europeans have to travel 10 or so hours. So we have to travel to 10 hours, but it evens it out a little that way.
Oh yeah, Jody, Jim got caught in Heathrow Airport for a while.
Oh yeah, I think 17 plus hours, like overnight.
Nice.
We were from a red country and stuff, and we weren't allowed to like go through customs at all, and they just kind of pen everybody up that's stuck from red countries in like a little corner of the airport, and there's just the chairs to find yourself comfortable on.
No, so you can't even go to any of the restaurants, or
they leave one restaurant open during the night. I think it's a little coffee shop, but I mean, for the most part, for probably 7 hours, everything's completely shut down and cold, really cold.
Oh, and you don't have your bags with you, do you? Because I assume they're being transferred from plane to plane.
Yeah, just kind of what you carried.
Oh God! So you literally got to sleep with your hand luggage. Oh, that's brutal. Did you know that?
I think
in advance?
next time I go through Heathrow, I'm definitely, because we've gotten stuck there for maybe 9 hours before UTMB.
Really?
And just UK with Brexit has made transferring through the London a lot more challenging, because you're just going through more jurisdiction and everyone has their own rules. So you add another level of complexity when you're going through security. So we got caught there, and I think now I'm just gonna start traveling with like my backpacking blow up mattress of like worst case scenario. I'm lying down on something somewhat soft.
Do you have dry robes? Have you seen those? I know they've started to come out to the States, because if you're traveling
No, I don't know what those are.
Oh, they're so. In fact, I've probably got one behind me. I'll grab it. It's They're so good, and I'm sure they'd send you one. So it's like a jacket, except the whole of the inside is lovely, warm, like toweling felt. So the idea is you can change in it and you can get dry in it. But actually, I go to festivals, and if I get too lost or too drunk, I'll just kind of pass out in that wherever I may find myself. And they would be quite good for airports as well, I reckon. So I'll
Yeah,
get them
I
to.
think the party atmosphere is a great use for it.
Well, we quite like to go back to the basics of runners and figure out the journey through to the start of the awesomeness. Because a lot of runners have quite unexpected stories of how they discovered their speed or their joy for running.
Yeah.
Like, where did yours start?
I guess mine started maybe like the absolute origins would have been kind of the soccer or football team I played for growing up. I basically played until I was about 16 years old. And even when we were 13, 14, we came out to the UK for 17 days and played a bunch of the clubs out there. And
Oh, no
I mean,
way.
still to this day, I'm sure that most of the clubs we played were using ringer older players. But
Probably.
What kind of level was this? Like, do you remember which clubs or?
I mean, we played Fulham, I think an Arsenal, like legitimately divisional team youth
Wow, yeah.
programs, yeah.
Were
And I
you?
think we won one out of maybe 8 games, like just got slaughtered. But generally, like every team would have just one big kid. It was like they would just blow right through us. But we
Yeah.
also had a coach, one of my initial coaches for, I guess I'll refer to it as football. So it's not American football, it's your football. But one of my initial coaches played for Sheffield Wednesday, and he just ran the hell out of us. And we were maybe like 10, 11, 12 years old. And I was always really fit at the end of practice. So I would say maybe that's kind of where maybe the beginning idea of running came.
But
And
what?
then
You went on
What?
tour against Arsenal at 10.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's the youth team, isn't it? What position did you play?
I got moved around a bit. I was definitely right-footed dominant, but sometimes, depending on some strategy, I would actually end up playing on the left so I could cut in.
Yeah.
But usually right midfield or right back. And then towards the end, actually, more and more, I got put like probably left striker and just a ton of cutting in and hitting it because I was taking the free kicks a lot and stuff. But now, if I were to go kick a ball, oh my gosh, it feels like same thing when I throw a baseball. I just neglect so many muscle groups. Like it's so singular focus now, and it just feels like I'm throwing my whole leg out when I go to actually like kick a ball hard.
And in terms of how good you were, like relative to, I mean, how good were you relative to other people in the team and your performance in, against other teams in the US? Again, forget about the Arsenal teams and stuff like that. How good
Yeah.
were you?
I mean, I was a consistent starter and like um one of the better players, not like the superstar by any means, but I would say when I picked up running officially probably my freshman, sophomore year of high school, which is I guess 14 through 16 years old, I was by far a better football player. But I guess I was still like the fastest kid in Arizona for my age.
Yeah.
But for football, it was a lot harder to tell exactly where you stacked up and we had just kind of started the process when I quit, is when you start more the process of getting selected and for universities. And in the US, it would probably be more developed around getting a scholarship to play in college.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was going. But I mean, after the trip to the UK, I had a serious sit down with my parents about like just going to boarding school in the UK and going full into to football and doing that route.
Wow.
But I guess my mom ultimately shot that down.
David went to boarding school, and yeah, if there's ever a reason why you shouldn't have gone to boarding school, it's right in front of us now.
Explains a lot, yeah.
You could have turned out really weird, but with a lovely accent.
With an awesome party jacket, though.
Exactly. It's the only thing that makes up for it. Wait,
okay, no, I just sorry, Dave. Okay, so what? So you went from like football to running. So what's interesting about that is a lot of people when they move on to other sports, they like recreating, like someone what plays for a team, they love that team environment, and then when they do something else, they're trying to recreate that team environment. To go from something like a team sport, you were really sort of like very close knit, then to something that's much more individual. Was that something that you knew you wanted, or something you didn't want team sports anymore, or was there something behind that at all?
Well, I would say there are a couple things of I'd say one, my dad was too involved with my football that I kind of liked running because he didn't know anything about it.
We're building a picture here. We're building a very clear picture here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another
Did
one
you break
would
his
be,
heart?
What was that?
Did you break his heart?
Yeah, I think so. Because that's what I was supposed to go on to kind of be. But I think full circle, especially knowing kind of how football led the beginning into running, because there was a guy a year older than me, so we were called like the 90s for our age. The 89 guy, there was a guy that went to my high school, and his parents pushed him into cross country and track big time. Like his parents were track runners.
Right.
And so I was good friends with him, but he was just nonstop pressure of like, you got to run. And so I got talked into going out to cross country my freshman year. And basically for a year and a half, I had an overlap of injuries. And so I would also say I didn't get along with my teammates playing football. I don't really stay in touch with any of them. I more or less got picked on a lot, but at the same time was good enough to kind of overcome that in a lot of ways. But when I got into cross country, I guess now I had a group of friends at my high school, as opposed to with football. I didn't live anywhere near them. It was kind of a collective throughout all of Phoenix, which is a pretty big city. And so having a group of friends within school, and then even like your results get announced on the school news, and like people actually like, instead of being a really good football player that nobody knows about because you don't do a school sport, because basically at the time you just didn't play club football, you'd play, or high school football, you wouldn't play for the high school, you'd play for the club instead.
Yeah.
So nobody would know anything, and it's like, well, I'm spending basically my whole life at practice there, and I just happen to show up for school every like now and then kind of thing. But then it kind of fully switched of I actually had a social group at school revolved around running, and that part of it, and basically the finding that community just as a teenager was kind of my first experience of how much I felt more natural with the running community from a very early age. Just people seem to be very accepting.
Do you think you were, by personality trait, like a natural, did you fit in with that group? Do you think you were always a runner really at heart?
Well, I was naturally really good at running, I would say, from like in my region, in my area. So when you're one of the better runners, and we had a really good team. I think my junior year, we might have had 7 guys all breaking 4:30 for the mile. Which nowadays, I don't know. Now, like, there's this team in California called Newberry Park, and they probably got 7 guys that could break 14 minutes for the 5K right now. They're insane.
Did they win? They came something like first through 6th in the championship or something insane.
Yeah, they're running insane. And then this guy that's running age group, I think under U20 records right now at NAU, which is here in Flagstaff, Nico Young. he's got two twin brothers that are younger than him on the Newberry team right now that are just lighting it up. But I think they're also the second, third runner. And there's another kid on the team that's a complete stud and whatnot. So they're just running the ladder on teams in cross country right now, which in California, it's competitive enough where that doesn't happen.
Because I actually messaged the coach over New Year because I just saw the headlines in Runner's World or something like that. And I thought, we don't know anything about college or school cross country, particularly not in America.
The US college is probably the craziest thing. Because I'd imagine a lot of countries you have sport as kids, but maybe the US just takes it more seriously than others in some, depending on the sport. But it seems like a lot of other countries kind of, as kids, a lot of times let them just do whatever. They go to university. University's generally actually studying in school. And then like if you're good, you end up doing sport afterwards and picking it up on a club. And you guys have a lot of club kind of organization within the UK to run for. But we get quite a fair number of UK athletes. I competed in the Mountain West Conference in college, and we would get all sorts of UK runners on New Mexico that we'd have to race against. I think the guy that was closest to my age was Ross Millington. But Lee Emanuel was a senior when I was a freshman. So, I mean, he's probably 23, 24, coming from the UK, just a pretty good stud, won the NCAA, and then I was 18 years old, just getting my ass kicked. So, welcome to that level of running. But basically, the college system's crazy. So, comparatively, I think that's maybe the most fascinating realm of US running is the collegiate system and how much focus and how serious they're taking that, because the amount of talent that just gets completely run into the ground in the collegiate system and never really pops out, or basically by the time they pop out, they're broken, they're overworked, they're not motivated or anything. And in my opinion, I think one of the biggest potential game changers for trail running that could happen would be some sort of safety net to actually quote unquote change their sport into trail running. And I think short distance trail running would just be a phenomenal break and transition for the collegiate athletes that are not necessarily going straight into the Olympics.
Because is there any way that a collegiate athlete would find out or be pushed towards or have a go at more trail or longer distance, or is everyone just put in the same group and pushed towards the needs of the team?
Everybody's cross country, which is basically for men 8K, 10K. Women, I think, is 6K. That's the closest to it, but it's just grass, thick grass, but not even muddy. There's like barely hills nowadays. I mean, the place they ran the NCAA championships this last year was in Florida in Tallahassee, and it might as well have been a road race. Like, it was insanely fast. And then and that's like the closest to trail. And then they go indoor track, outdoor track, and it's 3 seasons, all repeated. Summer's just base mileage, so basically it's like even more running, just not workout focused. I never knew of trail running as an organized sport. I didn't know anything about it. I was super huge into running, and the only thing you might hear about is you don't understand why an ultra runner might be really well known or famous, and you're just like, I don't get it. They just ran Western States and averaged 8:30 or 9 minutes per mile for like all day long. I don't even know how long that is. It's just, I don't want to do that. They're just jogging. And you don't necessarily always grasp the concept of the type of terrain and kind of the output you're putting over such a long period of time. And I would say that's even true for professional road and track runners. There's still, in my opinion, hot take would be a complete ignorance of trail running's legit running, and they should consider it, and also consider throwing it in their road or track schedules, because the type of engine that would be successful in Sierras and now will be able to run a really good 5K, 10K, or marathon still. Like, I don't think you have to give up one or the other, but maybe some sort of season difference would be better. But so only if trail running was better for winter training could it maybe get replaced for cross country or something. But mountain running's short too, and big engine stuff, I think. Yeah, so.
But it does seem that, because I was on the Golden Trail this year, and it seems that it's almost a 4-year cycle where trail runners become road runners because of the Olympic trials. Well, similar to yourself, where you'll have people like for Sierras now, people like Robbie Simpson, Francesco Puppy, and females like Maud, all then once every 4 years go, actually, I just want to see how fast I can do a road marathon, just in case I can qualify for the Olympics, because that'd be pretty sweet.
I mean, I think the Olympic kind of carrot is really difficult to not be attracted to, but at the same time, it's kind of sucks, because I think the trail runners that go into the marathon world very quickly, like myself or Robbie, it's like, for the most part, the training is different enough that if a road runner hops in trail running, they'll probably find it surprisingly difficult and might get very upset by perhaps technically slower runners. And vice versa, I think there's, on the sliding ladder, a trail runner transitioning into a marathon for just one block, you're not going to get like your best performance out of yourself generally on one hit. I mean, I think different people have different systems. By systems, I mean training environments that they're able to transition into. I think when you look at Tom Evans, for instance, it was kind of surprising because he found himself in basically a road group, is what it looked like. So it seemed like his transition came across more seamless than for most people. I think, like myself, I operate more as an individual, and even though there's a Hoka professional running group here in Flagstaff, I think I'm also racing them at the US trial, so it's not necessarily completely friendly. And there's a bit of an intimidation from myself or from the coach there to like let me in the group, or for me to ask to be in the group. It just kind of got avoided. And so I don't think it really works out to everyone's highest potential, but maybe a couple seasons back and forth it could be good. But more or less, I think trail running's fun, and I think that's why it should get almost like thrown into a schedule. Like, don't worry about a time, a watch, a pace. I mean, maybe a watch to upload it so it looks cool, but besides that, go race. And other than that, like, don't worry about it.
And do you think there's an element of, because every now and then you do get the trail runners going in for a road marathon or a 10K, a half marathon, and as you say, there's no chance that they're going to do as well as if they'd trained focused on that for an extended period. Do you think that almost, from what you've seen with the US trials this year, the Olympic trials, do you think that reinforces in some people, road runners' views that, oh yeah, we're just faster and better, because they don't quite comprehend that, because that's my fear as well, that it almost, it suggests it's a level playing field for that race, which it isn't.
I would also say likewise, because it doesn't happen in the reverse direction. You're not seeing proper marathon. Like, if a marathoner does an ultra race or a trail race, it's going to be a groomer. It's going to be flat. If Des Linden wants to get into ultra running, she needs to get into the thick of ultra running or like trail running. Go into the Golden Trail Series and try to have success there. She's going to get licked a few times in a few of those races. The Ring of Fire up there, I mean, the race in your guys' neck of the woods, like, it's technical enough that there's going to be a difference. And and even for foreigners to come there, even really good trail runners, for foreigners to come there, it's difficult to have success on that home soil when it's so specific. But the
Yeah.
number of general trail races that someone like Des Linden can also just completely wipe the floor with, I mean, it would be the majority. But then as you go further, I think that's another type of risk, that you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and it might keep going well, but it might also start to unravel, and what happens with that. So I would say just like super technical, longer tends to also probably favor the more reserved or kind of the tortoise of the ultra running world sort of strategy over the big and bold. I think big and bold, you end up, I don't know. Sometimes you swing and miss, and it ends up being nothing, and then the trail runners or the ultra runners kind of get their laugh about it.
Because is there a performance that when you did the US trials, that if you'd have got certain position or certain time that you think might have swayed you more, and you thought, well, maybe I might start doing more marathons and less trail? Like, was it just a dalliance, or?
It was kind of fortunate enough in that the course was hilly and windy enough that basically the time was really irrelevant. Once you fell off the group, which I think Galen Rupp made a big move, probably earlier than everyone was expecting, around mile 14. I mean, in that big initial surge is when I got spit out the back. So I had about 12 miles of not as motivated as I would have hoped to be in that situation to catch back into the main group. I mean, the only thing that would have kept me doing another marathon would be making the team, but I think the top 5 men in that race were beyond probably my ability. I would say, like, I wasn't going to touch them. And outside of that, I think I would have been competing within a little bit of a sliding scale, and it wouldn't have really mattered if you're 8th or, in my case, 22nd sort of thing. Like, it doesn't matter at that point. You ran a slow time in the relative terms of marathoning. You didn't make an Olympic team, and it's not much of a story. So on to the next race, I guess. For anyone, and most of the people in that realm were all people focusing on it as a job in the US full time into the marathon. And it's just, why would I beat my head in that world to open up a new chapter like that when I'm pretty happy where I am with ultra trail running?
4 years' time?
It depends. So I do think it actually lines up really well for road ultra efforts. So if I find myself going back to the idea of revisiting comrades, that's probably the situation. But I actually had the most fun with the half marathon, and I could see myself with the half marathon because the 2 half marathons I did, I had about 3 weeks of specific training. I mean, more or less got really fit how I would for trail running, and then basically took 3 weeks out of my schedule to specify.
Wow,
and I felt like I got a lot out of myself for that. And that seems, and then I guess so it's a short block. You can fit it in between other races, and the recovery is really minimal besides your calves, essentially. My calves get messed up for a few days from the faster pace running. But I found the way I can work a half marathon into my schedule, that one's more appealing to me. And
what are the big sessions in those 3 weeks? Is it the kind of half marathon tempo runs, or are you doing specific intervals that are more suited to it?
It'll be more interval work. And I would say the first one I did, so I ran 2 half marathons in that marathon buildup. The first one was I think 2019 at Houston, I ran 204 flat, and then didn't race again on the roads until 2020. I did a half marathon as a quote unquote tune-up for the marathon, maybe 6 or 4 weeks out, but that was down in Phoenix. And they actually ended up mismeasuring the course, so it doesn't come as an official half marathon time. I ran through the finish line in 62:15, but it was 285 meters short. So it equates to
God
probably
damn it.
103 flat to 103.10.
That's great. Was that a qualifier as well? Qualifying race potentially?
It didn't matter because I already had the mark from the year before by the tiniest of margins because 104 was the slowest you could run. So I hit that the year before and technically it qualified. So it potentially could have been a problematic if I needed the mark. So the half marathon for the next one will be 63 flat. So it'd be kind of cool to dip under 63 if I did go back at it. But the marathon I think is dropping to 216 or 217 to just qualify. But you're also getting over 100 US men in that race with that qualifying time. So to hit the qualifying time, I would say it's a nice achievement, but for where I like to set my goals, it's not too big of a deal.
Going from winning stuff to being the top 100 is quite a step down, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so then it really goes to it's a stepping stone just to get in the race, and then it's a race for top 3, and it's kind of exciting the way they do that for the US of just I think you guys had top 2, right? For your trials.
Yeah.
But it was a much smaller race.
But it was really unusual this year because typically you don't have a race like that where because it was the winner definitely got through and the second place might dependent on time if they but typically you'd only have selection based on previous times and actually we had one runner, Charlotte Purdue, who was injured, told take time out, recover, you're in the team, who they didn't select, which was crazy. So this was caused because London Marathon didn't happen, and that could be a change they do in the future because London Marathon in theory is the UK Championships where all club runners compete as a club against the other teams, but you never know who wins first Brit because no one's got any idea who 58th was exactly. And it's a real shame because in every other sport it should really be a wonderful thing that everyone focuses on is the UK Championships, and so it would be it's a shame not to use the London Marathon, but then for the sake of those runners, people are talking about those performances more than I've seen them talk about any performance in London Marathon since like Hugh Loeb came 4th or something in the 90s.
I mean it's such a huge storyline in the States for everything to come together like that and just look, that's your day, go do it or shut up.
Yeah, and it's harsh on some athletes, but then it's
that's why
the
people
fairest.
love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then going back then, so you mentioned you were in college and you were in the team, you were loving that. In fact, I think you only got to the first year. Did you kind of achieve anything big in college running terms that you thought, hello, here we go now?
Well, it was interesting. So I was going to a military academy in the US, so I guess the whole university college experience was stressful in a not normal way. And I basically knew my job.
Is that through choice?
Yeah.
Because I was talking with a friend yesterday we were driving back. A military academy in my head was where you sent the naughty kids to straighten them out in the States.
In movies they do. In movies, the kids kids are always threatened with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you apply to it like a normal school and you go through a selection process and they're pretty difficult to get into and like well known for being a good school.
Did you want to be in the army or is it because you get a good education in those
I think I
schools as
kind of,
well? Or
well, I think it combined three things, and maybe the military was the bottom of the third. But one, I really loved the coach that recruited me there, John Hayes, who coached me for all about 1 month. And then I actually had Julie Benson, a female college coach that I would say we clashed heads a bit because she came from 800, 1500 meter kind of middle distance background and was an Olympian in 96 for the 15 and loves like the hard workouts. And I just really suffer in the hard, like short interval, intense workouts where I kind of feel like I thrive more on the aerobic side of workouts. But I also said like I wouldn't have stayed there if I didn't also absolutely really enjoy running for her during that time. And I think the contrasting views of the coaching actually probably paid dividends in the long run. But so I really like the running at the school. They're based out of Colorado Springs. The school's up at over 2,000 meters, 7,000 feet. Then really good academically. Free college, which maybe that's combined with that, but kind of free. You pay it back, but and you pay it back with the military service. I guess I looked at it as something I didn't mind. I was kind of open to the idea,
yeah.
and I didn't think it was too much of a big deal. Like I'm pretty decent at being, I guess, a rule follower. So like making my bed a certain way or wearing a uniform didn't seem like that big of a deal. But probably in retrospect, like full circle now in where I'm at right now, as I reflect back, I think maybe I didn't realize that my personality might have conflicted as much as it did at the time and was probably more of a stressful time for me than I gave it credit for it in the moment.
Oh, what element of it do you think you were like suppressing in yourself, and what elements were you struggling with?
Well, I think like I grew up more in suburbia in the US and cookie cutter houses in Phoenix where humans shouldn't really live and it's just a giant city with no water. It's the middle of the desert and
That's a
super
bit of a
hot.
contrast, Phoenix to Colorado Springs, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought Colorado Springs now has 500,000 people, and I thought maybe at the time it had 250, 300,000. I thought it was too small of a city. And like the dream job I wanted was acquisitions, which is basically like project manager-ish, in Boston or LA. And I got stuck. So 2 weeks before graduation, first they gave me acquisitions, but they said you didn't get good enough grades to go to Boston or LA. You're actually going to Montgomery, Alabama. And I'm just like, are
Oh,
you
it's
kidding
fairly
me?
different.
Very different. But I didn't mind the heat. The humidity was maybe something I was a little worried about. But then 2 weeks before, we were actually having conference at home at the academy, outdoor track and field. And they switched up my job and my location 2 weeks before I was graduating. And basically, we call it being voluntold. I got voluntold to be a missileer and sit in missile silos up in Montana. And
Whoa.
it was probably the worst, what felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. The experience up in Montana and kind of leaning into the outdoor culture that is there and basically being a post-collegiate that's really fit and looking to just do something. You look at a local race calendar, it's all trail races, and you're just like, well, I guess I could go do that. I mean, and just probably 2013 was my first ever trail race up in Helena, Montana. And it took a couple years to kind of learning that it was a bigger and bigger world. But eventually, my time with the military went south. I didn't do so great. I got kind of more or less kicked out and kind of got dropped on my butt to figure life out. And it's like, well, do you
He
want
got
to
kicked
put
out.
together? Yeah.
Are you happy to talk about this? Because this is quite
Yeah.
intriguing.
So I would say that moment was definitely the catalyst in my life that um, made me kind of go towards trail running and put everything kind of into that. So I would say there were two kind of main events why I got kicked out. The first one, definitely all my doing. I ended up getting arrested for a DUI about a month when I first got to Montana. So I got to meet my boss by, yeah, I just got out of jail. Hi, you have to fill out paperwork for
Whoa!
me. So basically
Wow!
get thrown on the shit list there. But so I'd say, and then so quickly it became like I was on the shit list. Not real good reputation to necessarily, I would say maybe like associate with me at work after
Mm.
that. Of like, yeah, that's the fuck up guy. He just got here, and like they give you all the crappy jobs and this and that, and you do a bunch of extra work only to try to catch up to get quote unquote back in good standing, sort of thing.
Mm.
I would say that's also probably what drove me to traveling as much as I could to like Bozeman and Missoula, which are about 3 hours away. And I really connected with a lot of people up in Missoula, who were really friendly and like sometimes let me crash at their place, or I just sleep in my car sort of thing and run a race the next day. And um, so it started becoming a bit of an escape that way. And then I'd say I worked all the way back up to as good a standing as I was going to get. And then
The
kind of
neutral.
throughout the whole kind of base, there was a big like nuclear missile cheating scandal thing. And I would say, in my opinion, like I was already on the shit list. I was second lieutenant, never promoted to first lieutenant. So they say like less than 99 or less than 1% of second lieutenants never get promoted to first lieutenant, and I'm in that. I mean, I'm the outlier. Like it never happens, and yeah. So I mean, it's
Does that piss
semi
you off?
funny and this and that, but yeah, it kind of sucks in a lot
Wait,
of
wait,
ways, and it was a
you
really
said that
crappy
you said
time in my life.
a nuclear code scandal. Well, that
Yeah,
sounds incredibly worrying. Just
yeah.
rushing over that. What exactly was that?
So we have a lot of proficiency tests, and more or less people were texting answers to the tests because you take them in waves throughout the month, and so they'd be like A, B, B, C, B, A, B, B, A, and someone would text it to you, and so it's really important to get
Wow.
100% on the test. So there's that much pressure within that job that it created this kind of toxic culture. And again, I would say like I was at the very bottom of the totem pole. I don't necessarily feel like that cultural problem was my doing. However, that's the job kind of thing I got wrapped up in. And
Were you the person then, in
so,
theory, that would have launched nuclear missiles if Russia
yeah,
had launched them?
or the UK, anyone, I guess.
And
No,
what
yeah,
is that? How did you like? Because that's the responsibility that I don't think
yeah,
anyone can take lightly, but doesn't expect they'd ever have to do. Did you have to prepare yourself for that
yeah.
eventuality?
There's a lot of job screenings for it. I mean, to make sure you're as, I guess, mentally healthy as they could expect you to get through. But yeah, it was always a challenging answer to respond to when they'd ask, like, well, if you're ordered by your country and the president to launch, blah, blah, like, I think they'd be like, would you have reservations to it? And my answer every time was like, absolutely. I think you're a crazy person if you didn't think about it and have the heaviness to it. But at
Mm.
the other time, like that's what you guys are like giving me as my job. Like I'm here to do a job. Like so you look at it that way, and then I think personally you handle it with a lot of ignorance and just kind of again go to no one's ever launched a intercontinental ballistic missile in the act of war in mankind. That's never been use. So that's a fairly good vice to kind of use as ignorance of you're not going to be the one underground if it did happen.
How do you think you'd have felt
hopefully you aren't.
How do you think you'd have felt if you'd had the same job for let's say, the previous 5 years?
Well, I wasn't able to function very well, I guess, at the time, is kind of what my time in that really shows me. So, I mean, I was pretty like going to a psychiatrist once or twice a week, especially when I'd say like I was more like quote unquote the shitbag, especially after the second time getting in trouble. It was kind of like just a real big just like a dark time in life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it would be for anyone really going through, well, any time that you're lost more than anything else. Like, did you have a sense of what the escape would be from that at that time?
Well, I guess more or less it just transitions a bit into maybe, yeah, I'd probably prefer not to talk more about it, but
Yeah.
once I got kicked out, kind of deciding what I wanted to do in life. And I guess I didn't want to get a job. I didn't want to go back to school, and kind of jokingly said my dream jobs were to work at a running store or a bike shop somewhere and just start trail running until I was 30 and just make
And
ends meet and do that.
do you think it's kind of given you a different view on that experience? Has that been a fuel for you, or has that been something that has really made you want to focus on community and positivity, or having things like trail that you can control more?
I would say like maybe initially it could have been a big motivator in what I was doing and what I was choosing, but I think whether you're transitioning from high school running to college running to pro running, or college running to not pro running, just trying to figure out what to do after school, or after when you're super wrapped up in that world, what to do with like quote unquote your fitness and what's next, because you're 22 years, I was 22 years old at the time, but basically like I was in the military and there was no athletic future after that. So I think it was kind of a rebirth to just maybe chase some of that afterwards.
So when did ultra become the focus more than trail, would you say? When did you first think, oh, hello, this is something that I can see myself being successful at?
I think though the first trail race I did was in, I think 2013. It was the Prickly Pear 12K. And I remember winning that one, like kind of feeling like I smashed it. And there was a 30K in the event. And basically I thought like the big guys in Montana at the time were Mike Foote and Mike Wolf. And I'm like, I'm going to be this pedunk nobody that shows up and just whoops them. And that was kind of my first intro to, well, the kids do the shorter race and the real athletes do the longer race. And so I showed up doing the 12K and they showed up for the 30K. And I was just like, you're kidding me. So I like walked home frustrated because all the guys I wanted to race were essentially in the longer race. And I think from my track perspective, I thought, well, if you're fast enough to be good at the shorter race, you should do the shorter race. But generally, if you can't win the kick or something like that, you kind of got to bump up. So it's a bit flipped on its head in trail running. And all of a sudden, the longer distance basically kind of gets more attention and idolized. So it was a year later before my next trail race, and that was the 30K, and I finally did that one. And I think that when I did good at the 30K, I hadn't done an ultra yet, and I was like, I remember going back to watch my college's conference track meet in Wyoming and talking with my college coach a little bit and just being, I think I could be pretty good at the trail running, but I have no idea what this world is, and I think I would need to get back at altitude because a lot of the races are at altitude. In the US, a lot of the mountain, quote unquote, mountain races are in like pretty high elevation. And that, I think getting the experience of doing track and cross country in college at elevation, I found that really beneficial for training. Yeah, so I'd say that 30K was kind of where the light bulb went off. But I also had no clue that people ran 100 miles. I hadn't really heard of Western States, Hard Rock. Don't even get me, like I didn't even think like US athletes would be getting help to race internationally. Like I didn't even think there was an international scene. For the most part, the world I knew was more of a local trail running world.
Because was your first proper ultra the JFK 50 miler? Is that right, or?
No. So 2014, that summer, my first ultra was Old Gabe 50K. And kind of ironically, I was racing. So I picked that one. It was about a month out because it was a month out from the Rut 50K. And basically I just jam-packed the race schedule on what I could fit in the month or 5 weeks before the Rut into doing it. So maybe 2 months, but I did Old Gabe 50K and then a couple road races in between. I was just signing up for things because I found as long as I put something on the calendar, I could kind of get myself out the door to go train. Because I'd say back to like being pretty depressed and not motivated to get out the door a lot. Having something to race on the weekend all of a sudden became a huge motivator to go jog at least, or try to go muster up some sort of workout. So I did Old Gabe 50K in 2014, and then a couple other races, and basically by the time I did Speed Goat, and that was going to be like the real tune up to doing the Rut. And I just completely popped and just wasn't ready for Speed Goat with the elevation, the climbing, my general fitness, and then I would say I did too much too quick, like all in the month before, and just fell apart. I think I took 28th or something in the race, which maybe by relative terms isn't too bad, but I also thought like my fitness might not have been good enough, and I might just like try to pop. There was a bonus for the first person up the climb to start the race, which is always kind of a sneaky way to get people to do dumb things. I'm like, oh, I could take $1,000 and just do that. And I remember Sage Kennedy just ran me into the ground going up that thing, and like just had no chance at the altitude going up that hill. And I never ended up doing the Rut 50K a month after that.
But what did you think when you were during that actual race? Because that sounds like it's the first time you properly blew up.
Like what Speed Goat 50K?
Yeah. Like what was going through your head when were you having doubts about your ability then, or was it awareness?
Well, I was actually cursing Nike shoes. I think I was running in Pegasus and Nike socks. I was huge into Nike coming out of college. And I think it's the last time I've ever worn Nike anything really, because I had just the worst blisters on my feet. And I was just like, I've never had this. It's the shoes. And yeah, so I had really bad blisters. More or less, one of the main things I remember is I walked the entire basically 10K down into the race finish and just got passed by so many people is what it felt like. But I also remember walking and seeing, Pat, nonetheless, it doesn't matter his name to throw him under the bus, but he was 10-time All-American in college, absolute stud from Notre Dame, and he was just sitting in a creek. And it was Sage, myself, and him that all went out like a bat out of hell to start. And it just at least made me a little happy that he suffered too. Um,
And do you think
but
do you think you need moments like that to, do you think when you're ready, because you still go out hard now, it's crazy, but do you think those moments, they stay with you and like you make big jumps in your maturity and your self-awareness?
well, I'd say I still maybe believed it was possible to run how I was running. I just wasn't ready for it. The transition in, so I ran JFK 50 mile that same year. Like I took a break more or less, wasn't going to do anything, and had a friend phone me up and say, "Hey, we have this Adidas team. We'll give you Adidas kit if you want to run on our JFK 50 mile team." I'm like, hell yeah, I'll do that. And basically, they gave me a singlet and like, yeah, we don't have anything else for you. I'm like, you don't have Adidas shoes for me? And so I ran in like a Adidas kit, like a current pro Adidas kit on the top, and just mismatching everything else in New Balance shoes. Just in
Wow.
retrospect, looking like a scrub.
You're
And then the only
signed for a
strategy,
t-shirt, basically.
yeah, but also that they were saying like you get a full kit, and I'm just like heck yes, and then just nothing. Because I think the guy that was in charge of the team was just like, this guy's a scrub, he's gonna blow up. I don't care if he ran in college. Uh, you're wasting your time asking him. Um, but what was the initial question? I guess I'm losing focus on the direction of that.
Oh, we always do ourselves. I guess it was more to do with, because
Oh,
it's quite a
oh,
humbling
going out
experience, isn't it?
fast?
What you went through, and like, do those moments
Oh,
live on with you, and do you think
yeah.
they really help shape the
Okay.
head you have on you as a runner now?
Perhaps. I mean, so the biggest thing is I would say I feel like I can relate to a lot of people that are having initial hard struggles in the sport,
Hmm.
because I feel like I've basically failed at most of the big races that I've all focused on a lot. Like I've completely got my butt kicked at BGOAT 50K, and then it was 3 years later, I didn't forget it, and I came back in 2017 and had a really good race there. Um,
Did you win the
and then another,
$1,000?
actually, well, I think I won. Maybe Carl puts out decent prize money, but it's generally always 5,000. And then he used to have preems for the top two, so you could get 6 or 7 grand. I think I made 2,000 the year I won, and it was the lowest it's ever been for prize money that year. And it was like, I don't care, screw this race. Like, I just got the best of you today. Like, I'm on top right now. And running and started going a lot better by 2017. Um, and then another one is Lake Sonoma 50 mile. The first time I lined up for that, just going out a bit like a bat out of hell.
Hmm.
Typical blow up, I guess you could say, in my career. But then coming back the next two tries and setting a course record, and then breaking my own course record the next two tries at Lake Sonoma. And now I think running one of the best course records there probably is in ultra running in that final time at Lake Sonoma. I think it will be really difficult to beat, but mainly it will be difficult to beat because the race might not have the same prestige it once had,
Hmm.
because it's not a Golden Trail race to get into Western States. And I think that's why you saw a lot of guys kind of clash at Lake Sonoma, because it was a fun distance, but a qualifier to get in off a shorter 50-mile race. Obviously, Western States has had quite a few hiccups before I ended up figuring it out and winning there.
Because what was
So
that's one
far,
of the questions we actually had, because I don't know this story, where someone was asking about, it was Q Running was saying, thinking back to the wrong turn in 2016 and how it impacted your future. What happened there?
um, so I'd say like you're on a main quarry road trail, so dirt road, probably 2 car widths apart, and you got to make a left up a little goat trail, just single track. And I would say all I know is I can confidently say it wasn't marked well enough to get my attention at mile 93 of Western States to turn off of it. And I kind of knew the area well enough only to be dangerous because I knew the road I was on was going to Highway 49 where I needed to be, but it just happened to take me to the wrong spot of Highway 49, not where I wanted to be. So, yeah, more or less was leading the race. I thought I might have had a 10, 15-minute lead, but it actually had ended up, I guess at the time, it was an hour to hour and a half lead. And if I had probably enough, energy for one, but mental strength to basically not get flustered by something like that. I mean, it was an extra 4 miles. I went 2 miles past the turn, lying down on the highway, and people are like, the turn's back there, and had to go 2 miles back. And it, more or less, if I knew what happened and was able to turn around, theoretically, I could have been back in the race, but I fell apart mentally and was just done at that point when I realized I screwed up. And I also thought the runners, like, I thought that the next 10 guys just ran past me, but little did I know, like, everybody was spacing out more and more and more. So that was interesting. I mean, it definitely gave me a lot of motivation for 2017 and kind of ended up maybe being the kryptonite for 2017. And we had absolutely terrible conditions through mud and snow in the high country, the first 50K. And I would say I just burned so many matches trying to stay on pace through really bad conditions, which actually that run is pretty insane, all things considered. But it definitely left me down by the river completely heat exhausted and just done. I was consistently just throwing up. I couldn't maintain a body temperature. Yeah, nauseous, spinny. Everything was just completely gone, and probably like that for the next 10 to 15 hours. Even after getting a ride home and trying to drink and eat, it just wasn't going down or staying down. And every time I stood up was throwing up. And more or less, I think that just went into, wanting it too bad and just trying to force the race on a day that was not a good strategy. And then I think 2018, the thing was finally like, look, it's my third time here. I've already screwed this up royally twice. Like, what's the worst going to happen? And more kind of a laid back approach probably finally ended up being the key, because you kind of take what the course gives you, instead of trying to, like, more or less manhandle a race for as long as 100 miles.
And do you think your times, because your PB there is insane. Like, the course record now is just incredible. And do you think you'd have run 2019 as fast if you hadn't had the errors in 2017 and 2016?
Maybe, yeah, probably. Maybe it would have given me more leash to try something even faster. Because 2019, finally, the weather, like, lined up. Out of my 5 runs there, it's the only outlier. Everything else has been up in the hottest in the last 10 years. So 2019 is really the only year that we had cloud coverage almost the entire day. Morning temperatures were not too cold. Day temperatures were relatively cold. And then, like, you think about the way the weather lined up when Timothy Olsen ran the previous course record, it was over 10 degrees cooler. And even Kilian Jornet, when he didn't break 15 hours, it was cooler than the record year. Like, so, I mean, the weather can get better, but also once it is better, you have to capitalize on it. And I feel pretty fortunate to be able to have, like, one of my best days on the right day. But all in all, 2018 could have been the best run, I think, because the conditions were not good for going fast. I mean, Francois didn't break, he might not have broke 16 hours. And running 14:30 that year just shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and because I mentioned it slightly before, but you're known for leading out incredibly hard. has that always been an intentional ploy? And why do you think it's a new approach really that people haven't done previously?
Yeah. I think it stems from my track career. Because I think I was fast and really talented, but a lot of times I couldn't win a race per se. I'm not good at the last lap kick, but if I make a 5K, really a 5K race, I can beat many of those guys. But I mean, you can only kind of do that for a certain degree at a certain level before I would say you can't do that on the track. Like there's just enough guys eventually that are able to hang with that pace. And UTMB is a bit tricky, but outside of that, it seems like in ultra running, a lot of people don't want to lay their cards down early and they want to wait for you to make a mistake. So once you're fast enough and experienced or talented enough to overcome it and not make mistakes out front, I mean, basically you're forcing the hand for other competitors to either match the pace or basically quit on racing for first, because unless you mess up, you're not coming back. And I would say that's become more the norm for me rather than the outlier of coming back, whether it's especially 50 mile to 100K. I would say I'm pretty confident, and if I'm running a certain pace, it's going to be maintainable through that. Yeah, there's a couple other situations that all of a sudden throw more and more curveballs into it, but
do you think if you'd have had a few more blow-ups, you might have changed that strategy, or do you think it's almost baked in now to your psyche?
well, I feel like I'm in that dilemma with UTMB currently. But I guess almost a little in the middle. I felt like that 2021 I ran a little in the middle. First and foremost, I don't think I was necessarily prepared to run as well as I hope I would be someday. Unfortunately, I would say 2018 was the worst of, man, like less than 30K in, my legs felt terrible and just never came back. In mile 30, I was going backwards of like, how does that happen? And so with 2017 and 18 at UTMB, I put a lot of effort into being really, really fit, really strong. Like some of the craziest training I think I ever did was before 2018 UTMB. I mean, if I were to put that sort of training on a calendar for myself, I would say that's stupid. I'm not going to do that now. But once you get in the moment, you feel pretty invincible until you're not. And hopefully you're still invincible by race day rather than finding out on race day you're just human. But then this year was a bit, I mean, Francois being in good shape, really quick turnaround though. But being a 3-time UTMB champ going in, like, do you try to run a pace faster than that, or do you just match and try to hang out? And I've been fortunate enough to become pretty good friends with Francois now, so definitely like the easy answer was like, yeah, we're gonna hang out, we're gonna have a good time through the night and go forward. But the legs weren't quite very good. Not even close to 2018, but I thought they would come around. And just, yeah, I mean, I had probably a solid 40 miles in there hoping for my legs to come around and feel better. And they didn't. I mean, I just felt flat. And this year I tried to approach it with more conservative approach in between Western States and UTMB, and just hope that Western States is still there, the fitness and everything, and basically like really focus on freshness going in the race. And ultimately I think I missed my last good long run. I had a little foot thing that I decided to skip the last long run and just trust that it would be there. And yeah, I feel like kind of when I look at myself and evaluate that race, I don't think the fitness wasn't where it needed to be, and I wasn't ready for it. So there was a bit of frustration with pushing when it didn't feel like I was there for it. So now when I approach it and I plan on racing UTMB in 2022, Like, all right, you're going to go off the front, or are you going to stick with something more conservative? I mean, I think I definitely feed off of front running and confidence, and almost like if things are going well, I can just keep pushing that ball, and all of a sudden that little ball snowballs into a steamrolling machine. That can happen and almost push you into greater performances. I don't necessarily know if it has to be a different perspective if you were to equally thrive in being buried in a little group at UTMB and being more and more conservative. I mean, there's good and bad to it. So right now, I'm not sure whether I want to go with a big, bold, fast strategy, because who knows? Maybe 19 hours needs to be the pace at UTMB. Maybe it needs to be a faster pace, and all of a sudden, like, my legs are feeling good through the hills and the mountains and pushing, and instead of like, sometimes a slower pace can zap your legs the same way a faster pace can. So, or do I change that strategy finally, is kind of one of the main questions, I would say, going into that, because this upcoming year, kind of without a doubt, that's the kind of singular focus. And I think I've had even Francois and a couple of friends tell me, like, well, that might not be the best strategy to put all your eggs into that, and maybe you want to like take a year off or have some fun or do a different race. And it just kind of goes to, like, I've always done better at like fixating on something and putting more and more into it. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna try to do yet again.
And do you feel now that it become a burden, and has it become something that is deeply frustrating, and is that becoming part of the challenge of it?
I would say the most obvious answer to, I mean, Occam's razor of, like, the most obvious reason why I don't think I've performed or felt the way I want to perform or feel at UTMB is all three of my UTMBs have been after Western States.
Yeah.
So I think there's so many areas I can improve in that realm of ultra running, but ultimately I think not doing Western States is going to be enough for me to race UTMB how I want to race it. However, I mean, just even last year, the amount I was just fumbling with my pack, and the only one in the top 10 not using poles, and it's the first time I've turned on my headlight all year, is the month before the race. There's so many little details I can clean up so much better to make maybe at least it be a better experience rather than an uphill battle. So I think I need to trust that not doing Western States will be the key difference. But however, I'm planning on leaning into everything, and even ski mode for the first time today, actually. But it's nice. Like, I have poles out in January. I have a headlight out in the dark, and it's January. I generally don't get that out until August or July.
Yeah.
And it's colder temperatures, so I'm not going to do the same heat training block that I usually do in the summer, because then I usually go up into the mountains in Colorado immediately after Western States. In all honesty, I freeze my ass off out there. I just am super lean from the race. I can't stay warm, and I'm camping. I camp. The last 7 years, I've camped at least a month out in Silverton, Colorado, out of a tent, or I have a rooftop tent sort of thing. And I think I'm ultimately choosing a different strategy this year than the normal thing. And kind of the plan this year, again, to open up racing in April with a similar style race, which hopefully is going to be Madeira, but they're not really talking about their 2022 race, I think, until the end of January. And then
did you see a move to Europe happening for such a really...
So in May, I'm going out to France.
Until UTMB?
Yeah, so the plan's going to be to do my whole training block out in the Alps, and then
Wow.
to reevaluate where I want to stay during the winter. But
Mm.
it's actually, I've decided to do 2 cycles for UTMB because um, I think the move actually could be counterproductive this year rather than productive. In all honesty, I mean, it's a lot of changing, but
Mm.
so I think to do basically a year, start in May and do a year and a half is the most logical kind of cycle. And then at that point, whether it works this year, whether it works next year, whether it doesn't work at all, or whether I get 2 more DNFs, which would be worst case scenario, or do not even start would be in that category too. Because yeah, I mean, doing it as a profession, it's now become your job to show up to the starting line healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
first and foremost, before being in the right shape, you need to get yourself to the starting line. And going back to the Olympic trials marathon, there are some really good guys in the US that, I mean, I kind of consider like, dude, you guys are full-time marathoners. You get paid by companies and you guys are broken going into the one race they're literally paying you for. Like, I
Yeah.
already got at least that scalp of just like by default, because um, yeah, it's your job to show up for that one. And for us, it's a
Yeah.
little different because we're not on an Olympic cycle. So it becomes a yearly annual thing to show up for these races. But that'll be first and foremost for that of like, again, don't get too much into it. It'll be my
Mm.
first time in a long time not training at as high of elevation for a race. So that's probably what I'm most nervous about. Other than that,
Mm.
I think it's exciting because if I try to get the type of vert that the Europeans get, whether it's Andorra, Spain, France, Italy, one of the many places, I mean, yeah, try to get that sort of vert in the UK. And the difference of whether you're getting it in the UK or Flagstaff,
Yeah.
there's so much more work into it. You can't keep up with because we read it through the lens of Strava, and it's a
Yeah.
total skewed stat line. You're just not getting 4 or 5,000 foot climbs again and again and again. And in addition, like they don't even have to repeat the same hill. They
Yeah.
get to do a loop when they do it. And they hit 3 amazing climbs and descents. It's like
And they're
yeah,
learning
it's
the
a bit of
course.
a trail paradise. What was that?
And they're learning the course a lot of the time while they're
Yeah, I
doing it.
think for me personally, I think I've spent a lot of time on the course. I think I need to spend more time on the end of the course.
Mm.
But uh, it's probably more about efficiently surviving and moving through the mountains rather than the course or the speed. I mean, the speed I think will come with efficiently moving, but efficiently moving through the mountains means poles, pack, hydration, food, and like longer efforts. Not necessarily faster, bigger efforts. They don't necessarily have to beat you up the same way, but extended periods of time outside and probably getting caught in a couple different storms and this and that. I think that sort of perspective to have more of a freedom approach through the mountains rather than I'm hitting 100 miles this week, I'm hitting 120 miles this week and
Mm.
30,000 feet of vert and then the time ends up being whatever it is. In the
And
US,
are
it
you
tends to
excited
be
about are you excited about this trip or nervous, would you say, if you had to?
yeah. So I think I just made a post yesterday about it a little bit on Instagram. And I've kind of said I think, and I've alluded it from high school to college to pro sort of running, your motivations change so much. I think so many high school runners have a family or friend community base that
Mm.
they never have again in their running career. Like you'll never be at home with your parents pushing you as much sometimes, or maybe not. But at least the pressure of them going to your races every weekend, or the specialness of a college team is, I think, probably the most unique, special experience I've had in running.
Mm.
That's so motivating. And as a
Mm.
pro, I think you can get lost so much with just like, why the hell am I doing this? And so in the beginning of my ultra running career, Western States was just the centerpiece and the motivation. And for whatever reason, I fixated on that, and especially just being an American. I mean, I think that's all the more reason why it's harder for foreigners to win at Western States, and speaks so much more highly of how well Beth Pascal ran last year, and how amazing of a run that is, because they're breaking into basically the American championship as well. But so I would say currently that fire for me is with UTMB. I would say I kind of thought it was going to be at Comrades the last few years, but more or less I always knew the end goal was to focus on UTMB. And I kind of said to myself years ago that I was going to do 2020 and 2021 focused on Comrades, because basically the way it lines up with just being able to link in the Olympic trials marathon. Just like, well, you know, the leg speed's going to be there. We might as well try to go get the biggest road ultra race in the world. And speaking of hard to break into, Comrades is so specific, and those guys train so singularly focused on Comrades. I mean, Bang Musa raced Ultra Trail Cape Town last month, but there's no way that's the same Bang Musa showing up in what used to be June for Comrades. Like, he's just an incredible runner. And the way that their mindset goes of just all revolving to peak for Comrades. I mean, it's more similar, at least especially domestically in the US, for Americans to kind of do that around Western states, and Europeans likewise to do that around, I think, especially French. I mean, you see the men took top 5 last year. The way they build all towards UTMB, it makes it harder to break into. But ultimately, I've kind of always seen longer, bigger mountains, more adventure. I mean, I like running fast, but I probably like the adventure a lot more than the speed, even if that's a cost of maybe I'm not as good at the longer adventurous stuff. If I have 5 more years in ultra running sort of thing, I'd rather spend it getting lost in some mountains and starving and freezing to death in the mountains than just stuck to a 10-mile road loop from my house and knowing exactly what to carry before I head out.
And how do you view the almost the reshuffling of all the global big trail ultras, with the announcement of Western States almost being just a regional final for a UTMB system?
Yeah, well, depends a little on perspective. You could say UTMB is a qualifier for Western States now, but which it is. Top 2 out of the top 5 kind of get to choose if they want to run it.
I didn't know that, actually. Yeah, okay, interesting.
So there's becoming, I mean, the biggest, I'd say, conglomerate right now is definitely the Ultra Trail World Series by UTMB sort of thing that's come out. But in a lot of ways, it's rebranding. It still, I think, is the same thing, but it's shuffled. And I think there were frustrations from an organizational level to say, like, we need this race presented in 5 different languages, or like have the rule book in 5 different languages. Like, I remember talking to someone years ago, and basically Reunion, Diagonal des Fous, is a phenomenal, great race. It holds a candle to every ultra race in the world. However, if you don't speak French, you're kind of screwed. Like, you're just left to just figure it out. And it's like, well, I got to translate all this on Google, and I don't have Wi-Fi, and no one here on this island speaks English. Like, you're kidding me. It's very difficult. So, and I think that was one of the initial an example you could look at of how UTMB wants more control with a race. So basically they're finding control with, they're buying ownership of races to basically, I think, have some of that control, to have some of that say in how the rules should be universal and a fair, like, the same across all the races and stuff.
Conformity, yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think is one way to look at it. I would say that, in my opinion, would be, I think, the purest driving force in it. I mean, obviously, to grow as a bigger company, I mean, I think people have their pessimistic views on that and how it's greedy and this and that. And I don't see it so much that way. I feel it that they still have the specialness of things, but for one, their permits are so much bigger than what we have in the US. First and foremost, the races are nothing like the US. Like, there's so much more of an event. So it's already an event company. But I guess to another direction, you also have like Spartan Trail stuff coming in and buying up races in the similar fashion. And now Solomon buying more and more races. I think they basically bought out all of the Sky Running races to add or kill for the Golden Trail. What, I don't know. They can't come up with an original name. They need to drop Golden and they need to drop World Series. Like, two brands already use those first. You can't use both of those in your own title. It just drives me crazy.
They're my current employer, so I've got to be careful.
Call it Diamond League. Like, copy track, copy a different sport and call it Diamond League. It doesn't matter. But it's, I mean, they almost like, to both, like, I'm pretty sure they came out with World Series a month after UTMB announced their World Series. And even for an American, World Series sounds ridiculous because all we think of is baseball for the World Series.
Of course, yeah.
And everything else is just like, why would you call it a World Series? That's ridiculous. And it's not the World Series, but it doesn't matter. Foreigners don't think of baseball, so yeah.
We're aware of it, though. We are certainly aware. Well, I'm cautious of time, and so we've got a few questions, if that's all right, to throw to you from the do-badders. I'll quickly I've put them out in tabs, but
a lot of them we've actually answered as part of the discussion anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, it's almost as if we used them as prompts.
Not so
So,
bad.
I mean, you've mentioned this slightly, but your race schedule. So, Martin Davies is wondering what your race schedule for 2022 is, because you've mentioned you're going. UTMB is the big focus. Are there any other feeder races you're seeing as nice training runs or sharpeners? And his other question was whether you're going to be running without poles again.
Yeah, I'll be running. I'll just answer the quick ones. UTMB, the plan is to be the focus. I'll be running with poles next time. And as far as other races, I would say this kind of goes into a bigger answer, but part of kind of maybe some of the self-pressure I put on myself to show up in where I would like to be for races is kind of killed the ability to just throw in more feeler, easy races. It's one of the things that I loved doing the most when I first got into the sport and no one knew who I was. But now it tends to have a different pressure and feeling with it, where I feel like it's killed some of the smaller races for me because there is the pressure to perform, or at least I perceive it that way. And yeah, if I could be more relaxed, maybe I could show up to more races and not care if I'm getting 7th or 10th. But it's difficult for, I guess, my personality to kind of accept that the race, how I would say off foot or off balance. Like, I feel like I've raced Killian twice, and I say, in my opinion, I've raced him twice kind of off balance with, or I guess I've raced him 3 times, but one of them we both DNF'd in 2018 at UTMB. But my first UTMB ever, in 2017, I raced Killian. And just now it's kind of laughable to be your first experience from an American perspective to try to come in and just nail UTMB. It's pretty big challenge, at least from where I was and what I felt like I knew and this and that. I think it can be overcome, but it's just the odds are very much stacked against you. And then the other one would be Sierra Zanal in 2019, and that one's just through and through his race.
Yeah.
I think, and then out of all things, I think he pulled out a 4 or 5 minute PR on his 8th year, the year I decided to race it. He's like, "Oh yes, I wanted to focus on it," and then he just pulls a bunny out of his hat and pulls out a 5 minute PR and just smashes Jonathan Wyatt's course record of like one of the best runs ever.
Well, apparently, because I was there this year and he won again. I think he's won his ninth now. But apparently that was the year where he'd spoken to Jonathan and said, "Look, how do you get your record?" And Jonathan said, "You can do it. You've just got to attack from the first hill rather than looking around and seeing who's going to do
Yeah.
what." And so you happened to turn up on the year that he was deciding to give everything from the very start of the race.
Yeah.
So,
And in my opinion, still that hill, and for being a 30K race, how big and steep of a hill, it's really unique.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
if I can suggest a trail race for track runners to do, it's like go do that one. Like you'll love it. You'll probably get your
Yeah.
butt kicked. But to go out that fast your first time seeing the hill is just, I remember looking at the splits and just going like, these are winning splits. Like and other great climbers, whether it's Remy Bonnet or Andy Wacker,
Yeah.
just looking around and like dropping them and just going like, like Killian and Petro Mamu, which he gets no credit. He should get a lot of credit for that. He almost ran Killian down, literally ran the second half faster. And basically he was in our group early when Killian just went. Petro Mamu was looking at us and just went like, "I think I gotta go." And he just started ripping it up the hill. And that's when I was just looking around going like, they're crazy, right? Like they gotta come back. Like they haven't ran that fast ever before. Both of them have ran it multiple times. And yeah, they both just completely sent it that year. I mean, yeah, I think I ran one of the top 10 times all time, but I think I was a solid 4 minutes behind Petro. Like it was insane.
And is that something you are aware of and you do consider is your global standing in the all times, in the comparative, in the head to heads, in the record books? Like, is that something you're working towards, or that you do
Well, I
actually
keep mental
strategize?
tabs on head to head, but not necessarily in terms of the sport. That's in terms of me getting back at individuals. Like I know I'm 1-2 against Francois, and I'd really like that to be 2-2 someday at the very minimum. But we'll see. Maybe I can talk him into a shorter race.
Or just turn up when he's doing some backyard one that he's not expecting you to be there.
Exactly. That's so even the local 50K, I think, is the most dangerous thing for like a big name ultra guy to show up and race, because it's going to be some guy that cares more about it, that trained and peaked for it, knows the course, was running on it the last year, and is a marathoner, and it's flat and fast, and he's been doing workouts at the local track, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I am not ready for this. Like, you just need to take it back a dial. Like, I'm here for a training run. It's just, and then, yeah, another thing is I tend to run those too hard and leave maybe my best performance in training sometimes. And I think the best example of that is I tried to do my last long training run before the US Marathon Trials on a trail run at this trail race in Fountain Hills, Arizona. The same race or the same course, Pemberton Trail that Javelina 100 is on, for perspective.
Okay.
It's the same trail race, but it's only a 50K. And I ended up running like 2:48 or 2:49 for 50K on that trail race. And so
So was that near flat out then?
I think it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be more conserved and basically a building, and a negative split the second loop. But really the big uh-oh was Wednesday. So that was a Saturday race, and I was supposed to do 20 by 1K on the following Wednesday. And I think I got 4K into the 20K workout and was just like, this isn't happening. Like I just don't have it to run a workout. Like I can't
Yeah.
do the workout. And so I did that 50K 3 weeks before the marathon, and then 2.5 weeks before I'm just like, oh shit, I screwed up. I went
I'd
too
say
hard.
as well that session on my if I was doing a marathon cycle, that's a session which is my fastest session. It's the 3 weeks before your tempo, your interval. You were
Yeah.
absolutely flying. So the fact you can't even finish them
Yeah.
yeah, it would
So
make me feel
I
a bit
hadn't,
uneasy.
I did one 20 by 1K workout, and I think I worked down like 248 or 258 to maybe 248 Ks on a 1K loop. And so I was just trying to replicate a workout I did maybe 5 weeks out.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
got pretty confident at one point, like my long runs were going great. I was really trying to bank on more of a strength, longer approach rather than the short interval approach. So the fact that I was able to hit the times I wanted to hit on the 1Ks was generally like a really good sign because I was trying to be more
Mm.
strength focused. But yeah, I made a big dent there. But so one of the good things is I do think I pulled out a really good performance for the marathon and 2:15:05 on that course with the win. But I think I fell really short as far as getting my best day out of myself. Because like especially Western States 2018 and 19, the hunger to just when you're in the hole, just keep digging and digging and digging and like you've really peaked right
Mm.
for the race when you can just always feel like you're getting more and more out of yourself and
Yeah.
you're a bit indestructible in that way. And I would say the most depressing thing about the marathon trials was that at mile 14, there was only 10, 15 meters between me and the group that I finally got kicked off the back. I don't think that's a big deal, but the motivation to close back on the group and knowing with the wind that if you don't close that group, you're
Oh
done. Like you're
yeah.
getting popped out the back,
Yeah.
and basically anyone who got popped off the back would just flew back. So you
Just
had to
drop.
be
Yeah.
in the group, otherwise you're out in the open for the win. And yeah, that when I really evaluate that race for myself, the biggest disappointment was that the motivation to keep digging was not there on the race day, and that's what leads me to the biggest indicator of I didn't get my build up right for the marathon.
Mm. Well, that kind of links into the next question from Ultra Sophie, which is how do you deal with the pain later in the race?
It's easy when it goes well and everything's fit, and it's fun to dig when you're ready for it. But when
Yeah.
you really screw it up, whether you go out too fast, you're not fit enough, or you left it in training, that's when you find yourself really in the hurt mode. And I mean, I personally, I wouldn't say I'm successful at finding a way to
Mm.
um, have the best success that way. However, I think maybe some other races are also counter examples of people on the outside look at it as maybe a course record, a win, a sort of thing, and they go like, "Oh, he just smashed it." But then in reality, the buildup wasn't very good, or the buildup was too
Mm.
much, or the race, like Ultra Trail Cape Town, I mean, probably most people don't know there was a 25 to 30 minute detour on single track with 2 extra miles, um, more climbing, about 300 plus meters, more climbing. Like the course record shouldn't have been in play. In addition, like right after Platyclip, the first big climb, I went off course 0.6 miles, almost a full kilometer. Ended up being 9 minutes out and back on my Strava. Like you can go check it. Like I went the wrong way for 9 minutes total. I went from a 3 minute lead to 6 minutes behind. And then by the first aid station, the first like thing that got put out was Jim's 3 minutes back. And people just thought it was like weird, but not that weird. Whereas in reality, it's like I made a pretty big mess up in there,
Yeah.
combined with some stomach issues early. Um, it ended up being a really great race, but in reality, I would say it wasn't my cleanest, best race ever.
Were you able to shake that though, that frustration early on? Did you get to a point where you were happier again or did that stay with you the whole
No, I think
race?
mentally I hadn't overtrained. So
Mm,
basically, I think when you bring in more freshness over really borderline too much fitness sort of thing, like how much you're trying to come in with fitness. So this is maybe the best answer to the question is in training, do a little less than you sometimes maybe think you should, or if you're questioning whether to do one more repetition or not, just cut the last interval. And basically, the resilience that you can have when you're mentally properly prepared for a race and hungry for a race, I think is going to be a lot more powerful than the fitness gained by pushing further.
it's almost not, you're removing the pain slightly because you're slightly less tired and you're slightly more mentally prepared.
Yeah, maybe you're less mentally fatigued, so therefore on race day
Mm,
you have more mental resilience to more freshness to keep pushing.
mm. So I'll quickly fire some quick ones in. From Kev, any races on your bucket list?
I mean, the biggest one in my back pocket is probably go back to Diagonal des Fils someday, but I just don't know when that will be.
Plenty of time. When are you moving to France from Mary? I know you mentioned was it May?
Yeah, May. So middle of May, I think, which is going to be about 3.5 months out.
When you're in Europe, I tie this into Irish Mo JJ's question. Do you plan on doing any of the UK or the Irish big races or any of the rounds at all?
Yeah, I'd like to get up there. I think the rounds and everything are a trap. I think the UK weather is a trap. So I feel severely underprepared in my knowledge in that realm.
It's
Yeah.
fine. It's
Yeah,
not. It's fine. Just come. Just come. Just
I've never ran through, I mean, the closest thing I've ran through a bog is in Azores last year, and that was a total trap. I thought it was a trail race, and it's just miles of mud. And I was just like, I mean, I'm fit as hell right now, but I am not ready to run through mud. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. And the UK is a lot of that. So
It's all we've
I
got.
just,
It's road and
it's
mud.
all we have.
Nothing in between.
It's
it's
our national
challenging,
dish.
but I also know it's a trap. So I'm weary to come and do it. But yeah, I've been once before. I think myself and my partner have an obsession with Highland cows, so we want to get up north and see them. We love Highland cows. It's in Scotland, but we'd make a trip out of all of it, I guess.
And then you mentioned you've done your first schemo. That was a question from Alex. Is that going to, given a lot of the good Europeans do schemo, you mentioned people like Remy as well, world champion. Is that something you'd actually consider integrating into your training?
I mean, I'm committing kind of a whole month to biking. I've picked up skiing for the first time ever, which I mean, at this point, the start of it, I'm sore because I'm falling too much. I'm terrible. So right now, I just need to improve my efficiency in skiing and skimo. It's very much a new learning sport for me. I claim I'm not I didn't grow up being a skier. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona desert, and first saw snow when I was 16 years old. So I'm taking a little break from running right now, or planned break, but
Yeah.
I'm using it to maybe get better. And if I was better at it, I think I could definitely use it as a cross-training fitness thing. I can use it pretty confidently, use the bicycle for that way, and it would be a lot of fun
Yeah.
to use some sort of skiing that way. I think it's also a great way that Europeans stay higher elevation in the winter and
Mm.
in the mountains, and a lot of skills, some of the technical skills of staying longer days and longer hours in the mountains, I think are still getting worked on during winter months for them, where basically in the States we're switching like I'll switch to road racing the last couple of years, and it's just not working on helping me survive a cold night in the Alps.
There was one other question as well around do things like Big's Backyard or Barkley Marathons appeal to you in any way?
Big's Backyard is tricky because I think you don't know exactly what you're signing up for, and you need to be, the only way to have success is to be completely committed. Again, they're both traps, just like the UK. They interest me, but also I don't think I would find success in them quickly, and I already feel like I have enough projects. So I'm currently occupied. I think I could pick up some good skills by those sort of efforts that would be good for what I'm working on, but I think it's very easy in our sport with the amount of races and diversity. I mean, firstly, I think our race should be, our sport should be diversified into different disciplines rather than ultra trail. Like it's just all lumped together, and it's like trying to call all cycling, and that's it. It's not at all. So I think it's very easy to get distracted and off focus of what your goals are. And I think anytime I even do sign up for a race, I need to, especially this year, like, or years past when I'm looking at Western States, like, is this race building towards that goal? And this year will be like, is Black Canyon 100K in February building towards my goal of UTMB? And in reality, like, is absolutely not. It's just that would be an ego pride thing, home turf. I love that area during this time of year because the weather is just great right now. But it's a total trap to go be just running and training in January for an August race on flat ground where I'm not using poles. I'm probably not using a pack. I'm running during the day. Just skills I've already feel like I've beaten to death in American ultra running.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I mean, you've answered so many questions. Thanks so much for coming on and being so open and candid. And sorry if we took you into areas we weren't expecting.
I'm sorry about that because it hasn't really hit a nerve like that in several years. So I've done other podcasts or interviews and brought it up, but for whatever reason, it kind of hit a little bit of a nerve, but that hasn't happened in a really long time, so I wouldn't have expected it. And I mean, it's generally something I try to kind of pass over, but no worries. I wouldn't expect it to happen.
It's a really interesting part of who you are and part of your story as well. And so sorry if we didn't give it enough of a nice padded. Because I was joking along and then like, oh crap, this Jim's really upset about this. I hadn't realised. Oh no, I felt awful.
No, it is a big link in kind of I think where I found myself today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Good luck with the move to France, and I'm going to be out for Golden Trail World Series unless they change the name because of the gold in the World Series, which they may do after this. But I'll be out in Chamonix for that.
For everyone else's sanity, they need to.
Do you hear that, Greg? You've heard it from Jim. He doesn't want to come back for the mud anymore.
It's a phenomenal series. It's just the name is very confusing. I love the race. I love what they're doing. The athletes are incredible, but the name of the series is highly confusing.
Amazing. And if people want to follow you and haven't already, I mean, obviously you're easy to find on Facebook and Instagram, or is there anywhere else they can follow you or anything else that
No, that's basically it. Walmsley Runs is my handle, but no worries.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on, Jim, and good luck with the move to France.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good talking with you guys.
Cheers, Jim.
Cool. That was ace. Cheers, Jim.
Great.
Yeah, thanks so much. If you need any buddies in France and all that, I know all of the trail community out there. I'm sure you do as well. But if you need any hand with that, or if you're traveling through London again and need someone to kind of help you out or take you out, give us a shout.
Yeah, for sure. I think we might be trying to avoid the connection through London, but if we get caught there again, I'll use you guys as a resource.
Or if you just fancy a trip to London, what's just based in France and something fun to do, let me know.
Yeah, it'll be a lot shorter travel that way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cheers, Jim, and hopefully see
All
you
right,
at some point in the future.
sounds great. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Oh, what a lovely guest.
Yeah, cool.
I was, I felt quite bad actually during the interview because I really was joking around a bit about part of it and hadn't realised actually, it was quite a traumatic time for him. And
I know. I never know what to. I mean, like I said, never know to do in the situation. That situation's never arisen before. But the thing is, it's interesting in the sense that he says that's a key, like, turning point, and so for it to be a key turning point, and also, you know, for something to have like that kind of emotional impact, then, you know, it's got to bring up that kind of emotion as well. So it's perfectly understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really exciting this next year and a half to see the fact he's moving over and he's obsessing about it, and he's gonna learn so much.
I like the fact that he is talking about the fact that a lot of sort of like US trail runners, US ultramarathon runners, kind of thought they could just go over to UTMB and, you know, give it a bash in the same way. And the thing that he was talking about there is that, you know, trail races and ultra races are just lumped together in this big old group, and, you know, and it doesn't really give a very real flavour, or it doesn't really talk about the richness of all the different experiences that you can have. Because even when we were talking about the UK, he's like, he puts that in a different category. He's like, those are not trail races. Those are something else. And I think
he was always like, I'm not falling for that. Like, I'm
exactly.
not coming over to get my ass kicked in those terrible terrains.
But we always said that, wouldn't they? We're like, you know, when like Americans talk about trail running and stuff like that, and even books I've been reading recently, where someone goes, oh yeah, you know, make sure that you go for a run in the morning, you know, in order to, you know, make sure that your energy is high in the day. I like to run along the beach in Santa Monica. And you're like, fuck you! Like, you live in the UK. Running is not a nice experience in the UK generally. So it's just a completely different thing. So yeah, I love the fact he just goes, no, not doing any of that. That is not, you know, that does not fit into what I consider trail stroke ultra running. That is something completely different. That is akin to just having a bath in mud.
Yeah. And the awareness that it's going to be an 18-month cycle as well. It's, if he does well at this UTMB, great. But he's sensible enough to understand that moving to France and getting to understand the trails and all the training in those is really quite a hard process.
And we'll see. Will he end up buying a Italian apartment for a couple of €1,000 and
will he be Robbie's new neighbour?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the normal thing. Winning a wheel of cheese and you know, enjoying life in the Alps. Lovely.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, and he's completely right, that if you start fast, then people are leaving it up to you to make mistakes.
Yeah, it's just, I love it. All the whole thing about he's very good at traps, isn't he? It's like, going to a local like 30k race, that's a trap, isn't it? All the different roadblocks you go. The one thing that I didn't ask him, which I thought was quite interesting, like, if you've got a dad who, you know, he's been pushed into football because of his dad. And then when you look at, his dad wanted him to be a footballer, okay? And I don't know what it is about like dads and football. There are some that are kind of obsessed by it. My dad thinks I'm the biggest failure in the world because I wasn't interested in football when I was younger. He literally doesn't matter what I do. I'm not a footballer. I'm not into football. I'm a failure in his eyes. I just wonder, when you look at like Jim's like massive list of achievements, like his dad just looks at that and goes, yeah, but he's not a footballer though, is he?
Yeah, it
doesn't matter what achievements you do.
He's still not running out at the ground of Man United.
Exactly.
Maybe. Yeah, completely. Well, I'm really excited to see how this goes. this next 6 months. And interestingly, I was going to talk to him about Golden Trail as
Are
well.
you going to change? Are they going to change the name? They're going to change the name.
No chance now. Of course not. It's all registered. Why would you? No, you're not going to change the name now. You're just going to stay it enough until people only remember your name, and then they forget the other versions until it's bigger than the World Series. But
Are there
I
other
was going to.
versions? Are there other versions then it can possibly get mixed up with?
Well, I guess you've got because series is series is an unusual word in America. If you think about seasons and series.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
We use the word series where they'd use seasons. So actually series is the word we typically use for something like this. Whereas World Series is their terminology for that. And I don't think they call many other things series in the same way. So it's just not as much common parlance. But it's interesting. He saw that as one of those. I thought I was coming for trail running because he did the championship last year. Because they had to cancel so many races, they put 4 races back to back for the best runners. It invited along the best runners to it. He was one of those, and it was a proper slogfest. It was raining almost the whole way through. It was mud everywhere, roots, and so yeah. I mean, I didn't have to ask my question. I got the sense just from his few. This is
a Spartan game situation. I thought we were going to be doing the thing that I'm really good at.
Yeah. Well, it was more akin to running in the fells than anywhere else you could almost get in Europe, actually. So I think he was coming over thinking it'll be interesting to run in Europe where it's really traily and being like, what is all this mud and everything.
Amazing.
But do badders, which guests do you want us to get on next? Because Jim's someone we hadn't even thought to invite on because he's such a big name, and
we knew he was a big name before he came on, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, that's how big he was. But who else are we missing that we've thought about and thought no. When we thought about years ago and thought no, they're too big for us, or other names that are too obvious that we've just almost forgotten about now. So let us know and we'll go and invite them and get them on. But if you like this episode, please do subscribe. Please do review us. The reviews really help us with our credibility and help get guests like Jim. And if you want to ask questions to the guests in the future, follow us on Instagram because we post there in advance it's coming on. You put the questions there. We ask them to Jim as we did today. Anything to throw to the mix, Jim? Jim. Jody?
Yeah, if you want to join the conversation, head over to the Facebook group. If you type in Bad Morning Podcast on Facebook, you head over to there, answer 3 questions. We'll let you in. You can join the conversation. If you'd like to buy BBR merch, we have that available at store.badboyrunning.com. We're also taking a whole store's worth to the National Running Show in Birmingham, when we're hosting the Ultra Zone, where we will be exclusively making mugs available to purchase.
Ooh, I know. That's exciting, right? That's worth the entrance alone.
Worth the free ticket alone. Oh, I think we should actually mention if you want to get tickets to the National Running Show, I think you can still get them free tickets with the BBR code. Can you not?
Probably. What's the code? BBR?
I think it's BBR.
Or maybe it's FYB. BBR. There you go.
BBR. Just try it. Everyone tries everything. Try anything related to BBR. Go through the BBR lexicon, and one of them's bound to work. But I think it's BBR is the code to use to get your free ticket.
Amazing. Well, we'll see you there, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.